We'll be talking through our top 10 predictions for 2017, and we'll also be assessing some of the outcomes of the predictions that we made last year. These will then be followed by a Q&A session. Just to begin with, a little introduction to Juniper Research if you're not familiar with us. We were formed just over 15 years ago, initially focusing primarily on the mobile space, but primarily due to increased convergence amongst industries, the desire to use, to access content and services across a multitude of channels, we've increasingly extended our focus across the whole of the digital space. And now we provide both off-the-shelf research and bespoke content across more than 50 markets in the mobile and digital ecosystem. Now, for the past 7 years, we've been bringing out a set of end-of-year predictions in which we look over the key technologies, devices and services that we expect to be setting trends and disrupting industries over the next 12 months or so. We've been looking at where the VC capital's heading, what legislative changes are planned, what product launches are in the pipeline, what's expected to be hot at key industry showcases like CES and the Mobile World Congress. We've been speaking to senior executives across an array of verticals to gauge their thoughts on the core developments in the coming months. And then our analyst team whittles down a long list of possibles into a shorter list of probables, which are then ranked on their likely overall impact in 2017 to give us our latest set of top 10 predictions. Now, for this webinar, we put together a couple of slides on each of the trends. For each trend, we'll be exploring 4 key aspects. What is the opportunity? Why 2017? Who will benefit? And lastly, what do we predict will happen? Now, where relevant, we've also included the title of existing Juniper research in the trend in question on the second of the 2 slides per topic area. Now, when my colleagues and I run through the list in reverse order, we'll be answering a few of your questions. You can send your questions to us while the webinar is in progress. On the webinar, there's a chat box in which you can type your question and then click send. We'll answer any other questions via email after the webinar. But before we go through this year's predictions, I'd like to take a look through a few of last year's predictions. Firstly, those we got right. We said it would be a watershed year for VR in terms of product launches and consumer rollouts, and we got the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift and the Daydream. These all launched this year. We said that consumer robotics would become a reality. We've seen the launch of Pepper and Buddy, and Ido is already out for pre-order. We expected that there would be a significant ramping up of 5G activity from Tier 1 MNOs, and we got that. You've got players such as Verizon, AT&T, Vodafone, Telstra, SK Telecom. They're all trialing 5G services. If you look at number 6, you can see that we expected financial institutions to embrace blockchain technology, and many of them are. Numerous stock exchanges, the ASX, NASDAQ, LSE, the Japan Exchange Group are currently trialing blockchain technology, and you have a dozen or so banks, including Santander and UniCredit. They're using Ripple's blockchain to improve their cross-border settlements. If you look at number 8, well, we've seen eSports delivering new revenue streams. And we also said that 2016 would begin the development of software security that relies on monitoring network activity for anomalies, and that is certainly an area that's gathering pace. Now, where we were a little off target, we said that there would be significant activity in the enterprise wearable space, if you look at 3, and it hasn't really materialized yet, in part because there are still major concerns around return on investment. Many devices, one platform. Well, while Apple made cross-device task transfer part of iOS 10, this has been less successful elsewhere. Now, if you go down to number 7, with regards to the hybrid console, our assumption was that the NX console would drop this year, and it hasn't. And the other one of our top 10s where our expectations were really fulfilled came in terms of crowdfunding for tech startups. And I'd argue that in some part this really reflects a wider unease in terms of tech investment which flatlined in the VC sector, and this in turn was partly attributable to a macroeconomic malaise. So that was a summary of some of the hits and misses from 2016. So what does next year hold in store? Well, to begin with, I'd like to introduce my colleague Lauren Foye, who will lead you in with number 10, Bots Are Hot.
Thank you, Windsor. So to begin with, Juniper expects 2017 to be the year that bots are hot. So firstly, what is a chatbot? Well, essentially, chatbots are virtual agents who operate over social media platforms or messaging applications to provide an automated response. Chatbots have been designed to aid in a number of processes, reducing the need for human-to-human interaction. Therefore, there is significant opportunity for businesses in that bots can aid with day-to-day activities. For example, e-commerce transactions, the booking of hotels and tickets, or even customer service inquiries, with these activities taking place through a chat window. So why 2017? Well, Juniper believes that 2017 will be the year that sees these artificial intelligence programs launched into the mainstream. So while some messaging bots are currently in place, there has not been significant rollout of services in Western markets as of yet, and this is due to a lack of features on offer. So the picture to the right shows Domino's Dom the Pizza bot, whose only feature currently is to order a user's pre-chosen favourite pizza. Juniper believes that these early examples are not representative of the potential offered by this emerging platform, and in some cases, bots have been held back until quality products can be produced. In contrast, the Far East has witnessed huge engagement with chatbots, where the programs are used to make a range of transactions, bookings and orders, with this largely done by chat. Juniper believes that next year we'll see bots take off at scale in Western markets too. So the industry is on the verge of a wave of major launches as product capabilities catch up with expectations. And as shown, a number of interactive bots now exist, such as Poncho the weather bot. There is huge potential for the Facebook platform, and it will likely be the greatest benefactor, where integration with social media accounts sees these linked directly to Facebook's own messaging application. Therefore, there is a significant opportunity for individual experiences, where bots may target users with tailored offers and discounts, having utilized available social media analytics. As such, retailers and brands are likely to seek greater chatbot integration with the services they offer. Facebook Messenger has already seen an update as of November, which now allows companies to link adverts on Facebook directly to a chatbot program, which is then opened up in Messenger. Therefore, Juniper believes that 2017 will see greater advertising spend as companies seek to draw users into automated chatbot programs. And at number 9, Juniper believes that 2017 will see consoles reinvent themselves. So significant opportunity lies for console providers to release upgraded hardware during the standard console lifecycle, bringing in new and emerging technologies such as 4K and virtual reality. In the past, home consoles have seen a pattern of generational replacement, which has on average taken place between 6 to 8 years. As a result, with the rapid pace of technology developments, modern consoles have lagged behind PCs in terms of graphical capabilities and format standards. The current 8th generation of consoles, which include the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, which launched in 2013, have already found themselves in this situation. So why 2017? Well, while some mid-cycle changes have occurred previously, such as the PlayStation Slim, a complete remodeling and significant hardware upgrade has not been seen as of yet. However, this is soon to change, with Microsoft's Xbox Scorpio, as shown in the picture, announced at E3 2016. The console is a complete redesign due for release in December next year, with this just 4 years into the current console generation. So who will benefit? Well, it is believed that the Scorpio will support high-end virtual reality hardware in the form of the Oculus Rift, seeing expansion into VR gaming, as well as true 4K media, and it will leverage processing capabilities well above those seen in the current Xbox One and PlayStation 4, thus falling more in line with the abilities displayed by PCs. This means that Microsoft will operate the most powerful home console yet, and this will be in a market where Juniper, as shown on the right, forecasts the install base to reach over 150 million next year. These developments are crucial, as leading consoles have not seen true 4K gaming, whereas PCs have had this capability for a number of years. It also means that games developers will benefit from being able to market high-spec products with superior graphics to gamers who want the highest fidelity experience. Console vendors will also benefit from expansion into new and emerging content formats, as they seek to establish consoles as a home entertainment center. With new standards such as 4K and high dynamic range, the initial crop of 8th generation consoles fall behind other home cinema devices in their delivery capabilities. And in response, attempts have already been made to rectify this, with the 4K video-capable Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 Pro both launched in H2 2016. But with Microsoft leading the way, Juniper believes that Sony will need to respond to these developments and will almost certainly announce new PlayStation hardware at E3 2017 next June. Now over to you, Steffen.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, so in at number 8 we have autonomous driving legislation commences. So if we look at the autonomous driving market, and really what is the opportunity here, it's really about defining a legislative landscape that will open the door to commercial rollouts. At the present time, it's our belief that the market is beginning to reach a critical stage in development, as the challenges that face the market are what one could think of as a fork in the road. So on the one hand, you have available technologies that are in place today that mean that autonomous systems are, in many circumstances, actually relatively competent drivers with existing limitations that are likely to be solved in future via improved sensor fusion and algorithms. On the other hand, you have a legislative landscape which will define the framework for use and possibly even technical standards, which is ill-defined even in the US. So, for example, you have the states of Nevada, California, Florida and Michigan, which have all legislated with regards to testing, albeit very at a patchwork, inconsistent level. For example, Nevada, there you require a special license and vehicle registration, but that only applies to vehicles that have been sold in that state. While Florida's regulation had a rather amusing one that stated the state does not prohibit or even specifically regulate the testing or operation of autonomous technology. Earlier on in September this year, the NHTSA, so that's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration body over in the US, released a set of policy guidelines with regards to safety, testing and deployment of autonomous vehicles. And that's certainly a step towards the common implementation, but at the same time, it stops short of being brought into law. So why do we think that 2017 is going to be the year? Well, first of all, we expect pressure on policymakers to occur to fast-track legislation. And indeed, in April this year, players such as Google, Ford, Uber, Lyft and Volvo set up an alliance called the Self-Driving Coalition for Safer Streets with the specific aim of pressuring lawmakers into considering the future legislation to ensure a smooth rollout of these technologies. It's highly likely that their efforts will increase next year, given the earlier points made in this slide. And furthermore, if the coalition is able to convince Congress that a national framework is required, then the effect of that is that you have a level playing field that is established, and which in turn is likely to encourage innovation and reduce testing costs. For example, the use of the LiDAR technology is not a standardized requirement for self-driving cars. If it is then decided at federal level that this is a requirement, then those not using that technology, such as Tesla's current implementation, as in the vehicle that we see depicted there on the bottom right, they might find that their costs have suddenly and massively increased. And early legislation to establish a playing field would avoid this for entrant players. So one of the overriding benefits of autonomous vehicles will be a reduction in road fatalities, and that's the major selling point for the technology, especially when one considers that most road traffic accidents are caused by human error. We also believe that it will transform the current value chain as, for example, individual ownership of vehicles moves towards shared use and drives new business models around that. New types of insurance will be required, leading to further disruption in this market. Now, really, proper legislation is fundamental to driving that forward and realizing the market benefits. So one of the requirements for mass adoption of the technology will, in the first instance, be V2X infrastructure. So that's to say communications enabled between vehicles themselves, infrastructure on the road, as well as even pedestrians. However, that of course requires investment, which can't take place at scale without a clear path ahead. Again, there are opportunities here both for network operators as well as service providers, particularly those specializing in cybersecurity. So, along with the coalition's efforts, we also expect to see further market developments that will both drive the need for legislative action as well as increase the level of competition on the market. Baidu, for example, another specialist in artificial intelligence, has just received permission to conduct tests in California. Meanwhile, Tesla, whose Model S vehicle was infamously involved in 2 fatal accidents this year, while its autopilot software was in use, might see that the findings into these investigations influence lawmakers with regards to legislation moving forward. And finally, we also believe that Apple, who have been notably rumored to be working on their self-driving software, we expect this solution to be released next year. For example, the company has spent close to $30 billion on R&D over the past 4 years, while they've recently significantly ramped up their efforts in artificial intelligence. So it's likely that we'll see an interesting announcement to look forward to at their Worldwide Developers Conference. Combined, these factors should then lay the groundwork for a market which should begin to gain traction earlier on in the next decade. As you can see there from the chart on the right-hand side of the slide, we envisage around 8 million autonomous vehicles to be selling across North America and West Europe by 2025. Okay, and now we can move to number 7, which concerns the battle of the voice assistants. Now, voice assistants have taken the spotlight in a variety of ways in the past few years across several platforms. So you've got smartphones to smart TVs, and now an emerging part of that ecosystem is now happening in the smart home. Each of the larger players who've staked their claim to this have established their own ecosystem of services. So, for example, Google has its Assistant, which was released earlier on this year. Apple has Siri. Amazon has Alexa, while Microsoft offers Cortana. Now, the opportunity for these voice assistants is to offer a more natural platform for ecosystem companies to integrate their products in the way that communication with these services is more natural. At the same time, it will be a new avenue for advertisers to push sponsored content and paid search opportunities. We also believe that content providers will use these platforms to onboard consumers to use their premium services, first of all, on a trial basis, which is then likely to boost those retention rates for these companies. This year, we've seen the launch of a variety of voice assistants across multiple platforms, and so the basic utility of a voice assistant has become much clearer to the end user across 2016. We think that 2017 will be the year that the platforms that are in place now, and emerging platforms, will be promoted on the basis of their services, with things like app integration and partnerships being the biggest angle. Amazon, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, they'll all be looking to differentiate their voice assistants, while you've got Viv, who was recently acquired by Samsung earlier on in the year, whose service is slated for release by the latter via Samsung smartphones next year. Now, the demo of the service was very well received. Meanwhile, it's been promoted as an open voice assistant platform. Now, these combined factors will undoubtedly force competitors to renew their efforts to integrate with as many services as possible to provide the best user experience. We also expect that things like voice-activated user control will emerge in 2017 to provide a sort of must-have feature for a company that can bring it to market first. So here, for example, a user's voice print will be linked to a specific account, and that in turn can facilitate services such as commerce and productivity. We believe that the ability for players to extend these capabilities across a multi-platform environment will serve as further differentiation points moving into 2017 and beyond. So in terms of who will benefit, well, it will be those who have their own service ecosystems in the first instance to plug a voice assistant into, and those who will be able to provide a more expansive user experience. So, for example, here we can talk about Amazon's third-party advantage, where the open nature of their Alexa service has resulted in a number of different companies adopting it and using it. As a result, we expect this kind of model to bring in a high number of users. At the same time, you've got Google, who's able to integrate its assistant with its various other services, which in turn will drive immediate revenues. For competitive players, the landscape may actually mean an examination of their business models if they want to drive revenue from this particular channel. For example, Apple does not directly monetize Siri, so it's missing out there on service revenue. Microsoft, meanwhile, has limited service integration relative to Google. So in conclusion, we expect there will be 2.1 billion voice assistants in use across various computing platforms by the end of 2017, with the smart home, as I alluded to earlier, providing the fastest growth in this sector. Adoption is likely to be limited mostly to English-speaking markets due to the fact that natural language programming will need to be redeveloped for each language, and the commands for most assistants are becoming more complex and requiring more redevelopment as each language is added. So, yes, now over to you, Windsor.
Thank you, Steffen. So we move to number 6, which is Insurtech disrupting the traditional insurance industry. So to encapsulate the fintech providers' offerings in the insurance segment, the word Insurtech's been coined. Now, Insurtech investment rose from around 800 million in 2014 to more than 2.6 billion last year, setting up the opportunity for new entrants such as GetSafe, Slice Labs, Metromile, Friends Insurance, and so forth. These new entrants have a more nuanced approach to insurance than traditional providers. They've often got products that enable consumers to tailor the cover to their specific requirements. So through the adoption of machine learning, the fintech providers are confident that they can accurately calculate their risk exposure. So to give an example here, Policy Genius is a robo-advisor which has developed a consumer-friendly interface providing instant quotes for life insurance and also insurance covering pets, renters, or for long-term disability. This has led to a battle really between the traditional providers and the fintech providers, with the traditional providers seeking to remain relevant in the new conditions. But this also provides the traditional players with an opportunity. Insurance providers will need to put Insurtech at the heart of their business strategy. Now, with insurance premiums worth in excess of $5 trillion this year, the whole scenario presents a golden opportunity for the traditional providers to innovate and remain relevant. These factors mean that the insurance sector is ripe for disruption in 2017, and we predict that insurance providers will spend around 8% of their revenues on digital projects as insurance providers come up with better and more innovative business models. Now, if you look at the chart on the right, you can see stakeholder disruptions and benefits. So that instead of selling customers annual insurance plans, the new Insurtech providers will utilise pay-per-use models, highly customised policies and social insurance. Insurance is also embracing the P2P phenomenon. For example, Friends Insurance rewarding small groups of users with a cashback bonus at the end of the year if they don't make a claim. It's also enhancing the customer experience via innovative solutions. For example, health insurers are utilising wearable technologies such as health bands to track an individual's health and exercise levels and adjust their premiums accordingly. And you've also got other benefits, include supporting the rapidly expanding e-commerce sector and cyber insurance. Now, the value chain in the insurance market is transforming rapidly. Juniper believes that there are key sectors within the insurance market that are set to benefit hugely from this digital disruption. And the key ones here are the transport sector and the home insurance sector. This in turn means that a number of players across different insurance verticals will benefit in the short to medium term. Key companies will include, as we've noted in the slide, Cover, Zongan, Science and Trov. And as you can see from the infographic on the right, we're anticipating that the market for Insurtech will reach $185 billion next year. Now, the growth here will be driven by a combination of factors, including machine learning investments enabling the insurance providers to personalise the products, and the insurers themselves deploying mobile apps to improve their customer experience. And as mentioned earlier, this will be enabled through new business models such as pay-per-use and P2P insurance. So that brings us to the halfway point in our top 10. I'd just like to pause at this point and remind you that if you want to send in questions for the end of the webinar, please do so using the chat box applications. We've already had a number of very interesting questions on the trends thus far. One thing I would like to point out at this stage is, in response to one of the questions, yes, we will be sending the slides at some point later today. I'd also like to reiterate that even if we don't answer your question today after the presentation, we will also get back to you via email. So now it's on to number 5, Challenger Banks M&A. Now, driven by the emergence of the tech challenger banks, the financial sector is set to witness increased disruption from technology-first players. In fact, as the chart suggests, VC investments in fintech startups reached record levels last year, almost $14 billion. Now, growing investments into fintech solutions and the emergence of digital-only challengers are primarily driven by two main factors. First of all, primary advantage, they're capable of delivering bigger returns compared to the larger traditional players, and easier regulation. This was a strenuous process in the past, but banking regulations increasingly facilitate easy entrance for newcomers, especially the pure play digital operators. So consequently, given the failure of many traditional banks to innovate and to keep pace with the pure play providers and the technology banks, this will lead to a number of high-profile acquisitions and consolidation within the sector alongside direct investments. Now, we've identified opportunities for both parties. Now, for the traditional banks, the consolidation and acquisition of the challenger banks and the tech startups provides an opportunity to leapfrog stages of development and transformation. This makes them more agile and innovative. For the challenger banks, having the backing of a bigger bank increases its capability to deliver bigger returns and at the same time expand across to newer verticals and gain access to newer markets. In 2017, we believe that, driven by the inability of the challenger banks and payment banks to rapidly scale and maintain profitability when compared to the incumbents, we will see a number of acquisitions or partnerships, and this in turn will further accelerate the rollout of the traditional players' digital strategies. Essentially, Juniper Research considers maintaining profitability and achieving scale of growth critical for these players, not just in the short and medium term, but in the longer run as well. However, the opportunity here, again, is not just for the traditional banks, but also for technology giants such as the GAFA group, and here we're referring to Google, Apple, Facebook and Amazon, who are competing to invest in emerging fintech markets such as contactless payments, mobile payments and so forth. It's Juniper's view that alongside the banks, they could and will buy up startups to expand across other payment verticals such as money transfer and remittances to become more fintech relevant. We expect the larger banks to partner with or to acquire new fintech companies such as Bankable and eBank IT to introduce digital technologies. Now, at this point, we'd like to take you through some of the key fintech companies and challenger players that are positioned in the Juniper Disruptor and Challengers quadrant, currently on the right-hand side. But if we take a look at just at this quadrant in depth. First, a little bit about the quadrant itself. We focused on the potential of a range of vendors according to a number of criteria. So innovation, their ability to develop new and distinct products or service offerings. Their agility, the ability of those companies to bring products and service offerings to market quickly and to iterate effectively on existing solutions. And presence, the approximation of a company's service rollouts or deployments in addition to its ability to project awareness of its brands and products effectively. Within this particular matrix, actual deployments and market presence are reflected more strongly than, say, social media buzz to give a better indication of its actual performance in the fintech market. So you've got the two axes of innovation and agility, while the area occupied by the circles represents the presence. So a company's positioning on the matrix determines its classification, whether it be embryonic, nascent, disruptor, or catalyst. And obviously, due to the crowded nature of the space, not all vendors can be displayed here. It's simply an illustrative selection to showcase innovative movers on the market. So some of the key innovators included here, we've got Atom Bank. If you look in the top right, it's one of the disruptors. They're currently offering an app-based banking service, and by the end of this year, it's going to be offering current accounts, overdraft, debit cards, credit cards, instant access savings and residential mortgages. And this app is protected by face and voice biometrics. Another player in that space is N26. So that's another disruptor, that top right, and that's aiming to be a borderless bank in Europe. If we move down to bottom right, you've got Creditech, which is one of the catalysts that's aiming to be a digital bank for the underbanked. And if we just cross over now into the bottom left, the embryonics, you've got companies such as Mondo, which hold the world record for the fastest crowdfunding campaign. It raised £1 million in just 96 seconds, and that's aiming to be an intelligent hub offering current accounts with debit cards and faster payments. That's currently only operating in the UK. Now, technology isn't the hard part. The hard part for these challenger players is this investment into customer acquisition. Now, we predict that most customers will stay loyal to their existing providers for now. We also anticipate that the consolidation between players means that you'll have different solutions under the same umbrella. And we also expect governments and central banks to act as catalysts here. So, moving on to number 4, which is blockchain deployments extending beyond the financial industry. So, what's the opportunity here? Well, initially, most of the original focus around cryptocurrency was on its usage as an alternative to fiat currencies, so the dollar, the yen, the pound, the ruble, and so forth. However, the attention has increasingly shifted from the cryptocurrencies themselves to the technologies that underpin them. Now, a blockchain is essentially a public ledger of all actions taken or transactions fulfilled. Within an environment built on a blockchain, a shared ledger is a database which records, for example, who owns a digital or physical asset, so Bitcoin, a dollar, a house, a business, or who's made payments for goods or services. All participants within the blockchain have got access to copies of that blockchain, which are in turn updated as and when a transaction occurs. Furthermore, the shared ledgers allow regulators to view all transactions upon the chain, making them ideal for fraud prevention and regulatory reporting. So essentially, blockchain technology is very, very important for a number of reasons. It offers the opportunity to reduce costs, for greater transparency, and for real-time updates. But why is 2017 particularly important for blockchain? Well, again, if we look at the chart on the right-hand side, we can see that over the past 9 quarters, we've seen venture capital firms invest nearly $900 million in blockchain and Bitcoin firms. Now, while investment was down year on year in the first half of 2016, this was more a reflection of reduced VC investment per se, rather than any dissatisfaction in cryptocurrency. Macroeconomic factors were producing a more cautionary environment. There were fears around the impact of Brexit and so forth. But in that time, nearly 100 Bitcoin and blockchain startups received funding. If we look at some of the key players that received the major funding there, the social payments company Circle received $60 million, $55 million went to the financial services company Ripple, and the infrastructure company Blockstream received another $55 million. In short, the groundwork has been laid for the growth that is to come. At the same time, we saw a lot of activity within the financial sector, exploring how blockchain technology could be deployed to reduce costs, increase transparency, and increase the speed of cross-border settlement by banks and exchanges. As I mentioned in the introduction, there's over a dozen banks now working with Ripple, and numerous stock exchanges are trialing the technology. Now, what we expect next year on the back of this activity within the financial sector is that there will be a ramping up of research into use cases of proofs of concept, that's POCs, in additional verticals. Now, in terms of which sectors will benefit here, we think that areas such as logistics and identity management will come to the fore. In terms of which particular players are likely to benefit, we see an opportunity for blockchain specialists to partner with enterprises and governments to develop proofs of concept leading to trials. For example, the Swedish National Land Survey has confirmed that it's working with the blockchain startup Chromaway to consider how blockchain technology could reduce the risk of manual errors while creating more secure processes for transferring documents. We also understand that several other agencies are on proof of concept in this field, including the Republic of Georgia's National Agency of Public Registry, and they're working with Bitfury as their blockchain partner. Now, on the digital identity management side, you have players such as BitNation, which describes itself as a governance 2.0 initiative, and that's introduced several proofs of concept, including a blockchain passport. Earlier this year, it launched its decentralized, borderless, voluntary national constitution using the Ethereum blockchain, under which clients can register on a smart contract-powered P2P and end-to-end encrypted platform. And it's also partnered with the Estonian government, which is arguably the world leader in digital identity, to offer a public notary service. We also envisage that a number of other national governments will instigate trials incorporating blockchain technology in a bid to automate manual processes, which are time-consuming and expensive. So, over to you, Steffen.
Thank you, Windsor. So in at number 3, we have the mass expansion of VR, so virtual reality content creation. Now looking at the market at the present time, we've seen this year several successful VR hardware platforms launched, and we expect that 2017 will be the year that the content for VR becomes much more prominent. So there's been investment that's taken place, and the fruits of that will be seen next year, particularly as a rapidly rising user base provides the stepping stone that's needed towards a profitable software ecosystem. So there have been times already that players like AAA games publishers are beginning to test the waters. So, for example, Activision released the VR mode for its Call of Duty Infinite Warfare game on the PlayStation, while Ubisoft has made all of its existing multiplayer VR games cross-platform, which is really a crucial move in the landscape as it is at the moment, which is fragmented. Meanwhile, if you look at activities outside the gaming space, media companies are investing millions of dollars into this platform. So you've got, for example, Fox, Time Warner, the New York Times. They've all partnered with players such as Oculus and Google, respectively, in order to offer premium content. On another aspect of it, we also expect things like location-based VR experiences to enhance tourism to gather pace. So, for example, there will be an uptick in the development of film content built specifically for VR. Several large media companies are already on board with the latter, while theme parks and historical tourism will be the biggest beneficiaries of the former. If we look at the chart on the right-hand side, by next year we anticipate nearly 48 million VR headsets to be in use globally. Now, with the market changing as it is now, meaning that high-end devices are coming in and being purchased, this opens the door to a range of content opportunities that simply wasn't available previously. Meanwhile, the partnerships that have been announced and the investment that has taken place will undoubtedly serve to drive the content market next year, where it will be necessary for those players who've invested to keep up the momentum. So, in terms of the beneficiaries of this expanding ecosystem, in the first instance, it's undoubtedly going to be games publishers, given this segment's traditionally aggressive adoption of innovative and immersive technology. Here, we look at established platforms such as the App Stores and Steam, and they will serve to rapidly drive availability and take-up of content. If we look at the smartphone apps specifically, we would expect an ecosystem to emerge for smartphone VR, as has happened in the rest of the smartphone software market, where games make up the majority of apps on offer. On the other hand, the multimedia app landscape will certainly change as we progress from next year and beyond. So to begin with, we will see a range of apps that provide video and film conversion into a VR experience. And when these experiences become part of the VR OS, certainly for major content providers like YouTube and the like, the content ecosystem will have built up to allow content-based multimedia to be accessible. We also think that there are multiple combined forces that will drive the market forward overall. So you have improved hardware, which itself has backing from players in the console space, which is important there for games. For example, Sony has PlayStation VR, Microsoft's Scorpio Project Xbox will launch next year, while content providers will look to generate new revenue streams via VR subscription content. Overall, if one considers the volume of devices there and the content, the highest amount is likely to be consumed from the smartphone side, due to the fact that these high-end headsets are naturally right now high cost. However, the quality and diversity of content available through this high-end hardware will undoubtedly ensure that the bulk of revenues are derived from PC and console-compatible units. And in fact, we believe that their impact will generate nearly a 300% increase in VR content revenues, ending with roughly $371 million generated by the end of next year. Okay, so that's it for VR, and now we refer back to you, Windsor.
Thanks, Steffen. For number 2, we have the advent of PSD2 heralding banking disruption. Now, in October last year, the European Parliament adopted the revised directive on payment services, that's PSD2. This law was created with the aim of harmonising the European retail payments market by enhancing consumer protection, promoting innovation, and improving the security of payment services. Now, key elements of the directive include the introduction of strict security requirements for the initiation and processing of electronic payments, opening the EU payment market for companies, enhancing consumers' rights in a number of areas, including reducing the liability for non-authorised payments, and the prohibition of surcharging, whether that payments instrument is used in shops or online. Now, the implementation of PSD2 effectively reduces the barrier of entry to new digital players. It requires banks to open up both their payment initiation services and their account information services to third parties, thereby allowing those players to compete with existing services in the fields currently offered by the banks. And in the case of the information services, it's possible that third-party applications could replace those of the incumbent players, further redefining the relationship between the bank and its customers. So why 2017? Well, it's fairly straightforward. The directive comes into force next year, making it easier for those new payment intermediaries to launch. It's also likely to lead to a dramatic rise in the number of payment options and terms that can be offered to consumers. It's been described as an opportunity to create hundreds of PayPals. So, who will benefit from this? Well, as financial institutions work towards the development of the framework, new opportunities are going to open up for new service providers where, for example, applications for credit are made much more seamless and pain-free. There's already a number of intermediaries offering direct access to consumers' bank accounts. In Europe, you have Ideal in the Netherlands, so forth in Germany, and Trustly in Sweden, and more are expected soon. Now, the legislation also provides the opportunity for OTT, that's over-the-top players, such as Facebook and Google, to expand into this space. So what will the outcome of this be? Well, our prediction is that the net result of this will be significant disruption across the banking ecosystem. In both information services and the PIS, banks will be obliged to reassess their product offerings to ensure that they can be differentiated from those provided by the new players in the space. And if we look at the chart on the right-hand side of the page, this gives some indication of the measures that the traditional banks will need to implement to deal with the disruption that the opening up of the sector will cause. They will need to become more agile in achieving fast, robust and transparent decision-making while transforming the technology landscape to deal with shifting consumer experience and behaviour. They'll need to ensure they've got a flexible platform to future-proof them for innovation, to be able to enable access at any time via any device. Lastly, they need to make the right choice by choosing the right partner for the technology, while providing a seamless and consistent experience to the consumers. Well, we've had numbers 10 to 2. Now over to Lauren to reveal our top trend for 2017.
Thanks, Windsor. And so finally, at number 1, Juniper believes that eSports, or the competitive playing of video games, is set to hit the mainstream in 2017. So, to date, the majority of eSports viewership has stemmed from online streaming sites, such as Twitch and YouTube Gaming, and Amazon purchased Twitch in 2014 for just under $1 billion. By the end of 2015, Twitch had well over 500,000 concurrent viewers on average, and over 2 million at its peak. So much of the activity on these video platforms has its origins in the concept of Let's Plays, where users create videos or how-to guides of themselves playing games. This has then been expanded to show competitive play between users, either of professional tournaments or to display general online multiplayer gaming. So what is the opportunity? Well, Juniper recognises eSports as an entirely new industry with huge potential in terms of advertising and sponsorships, with eSports replicating many of the deals and ventures seen in major sports leagues across the globe today. There are opportunities for traditional providers, with new growth in eSports broadcasting already underway. The launch of Jinx eSports TV on Sky in the UK follows the BBC steps last year to live stream the League of Legends European quarter-final, which was hosted at Wembley Stadium. So clear potential exists in 2017 to offer engaging content and contest footage. However, eSports viewers, similar to those in the traditional TV space, will expect to access content when and where they desire, for example through over-the-top and video-on-demand services, with advertising as a monetization strategy fitting well into this. As such, it is crucial that broadcasters look at providing snackable media and engaging content, perhaps also seeking to enterprise on the trend towards social eSports platforms. So in terms of revenue generation, with online channel subscriptions currently dominant, Juniper now expects a much greater push towards the advertising model as providers look to capitalize on this burgeoning market, with this reaching $290 million next year. Viewership is set to surpass 248 million unique viewers next year, as both online streaming sites and traditional broadcasters seek to promote the activity to a greater audience. In addition, as content standards improve, the games are becoming ever more impressive in terms of graphics, and this makes them far more appealing to an audience. In a further development, the growth in eSports gambling activities is also attracting a new clientele, with consumers betting on professional eSports matches. However, this has of course raised concerns around both the legality of such actions, for example in markets where gambling faces strict regulation, and has also raised worries with match fixing, and a number of cases have already been documented. Additionally, acts of gambling extend to eSports titles themselves, with in-game items being used as a form of currency to wager on matches. Steam, the owner of popular title Counter-Strike Global Offensive, has released a number of cease and desist orders to websites which have facilitated the gambling of in-game vanity items or skins. And so in some cases, these have effectively allowed underage gambling. Even so, Juniper believes that significant revenue opportunity exists across the eSports gambling space. And as we move into 2017, regulatory issues will likely be clarified in the coming months.
Thank you, Lauren. And that brings us to the end of this year's top 10s. Let's just have a recap of the rankings now awarded 1 to 10. So right at the top we've got eSports, followed by PSD2 disruption, followed by the explosion of VR content. I have to say that when we were putting this list together, a number of different trends had their various advocates. But ultimately, it was decided that eSports was the key trend for 2017, given the growth in the viewership and the attendant disruption it will cause. Now, moving on to Q&A, we've already received a large number of questions, so many thanks to you for these. And I'm conscious of the time, and I'd like to reiterate that any questions we don't address now, we will be answering via email after this, and also to reiterate that we will be sending the deck out later today for those of you who have registered. So to begin with, we have a question from Steve, which is what VR content is starting to emerge that goes beyond simply porting or adapting content from another platform? Steffen, would you like to take this one?
Sure. Okay, well, that's a very interesting question, and I suppose the way you could see the market right now is, as I went through the VR slide earlier, it is really at the stage where existing content is being repurposed for VR, as we've seen there, the example I gave for Call of Duty. However, we do expect this situation to develop beyond that as we move into 2017. Really, the principal issue here is the fact that VR needs an install base of users, particularly if one focuses on the games landscape here. AAA games publishers invest a lot of money into making those games, so they must have a low risk to ensure that they get a decent return on investment. And that in turn will need for them to be or to know and be aware of the fact that there are users going to be able to use that kind of platform, use the games that they develop. So we've already seen this year that there's been a big jump in the number of VR headsets. Now that growth is going to continue through next year, and that will in turn drive the install base, and in turn, then again, drive the business case for development of these high quality services. So, I mean, I would certainly expect that that something like E3 could well have a focus on VR. There are other rumors flying around. For example, Assassin's Creed could have a VR focus, while Bethesda is rumored to be developing a VR focus with regard to its Fallout 5 title.
Thanks, Steffen. We've got time for one more question, and this is from James. Do you envisage a scenario, particularly amongst millennials and beyond, whereby viewing figures for traditional sports are eroded by eSports? I think, Lauren, that's one for you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that that's something which we're actually seeing currently. There's a number of the leading eSports tournaments that actually do surpass viewership figures for traditional sports finals, including Major League Baseball currently. I think the key here, though, is that the core audience of eSports currently tend to be dedicated gamers who will follow a particular game or genre to improve their own abilities playing video games. As such, moving forward, I think broadcasters will be looking to involve new viewers, by explaining how eSports works and basically introducing them through the provision of attractive content and engaging content. But I think with the standard of video games currently, that should not be too much of a concern moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Lauren. Well, we are rapidly running out of time, so first of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Lauren Foye and Steffen Sorrell. I'd also like to thank you for taking the time to listen to our webinar. Just here is a little overview of our services, which is contained within the slide set that you'll be receiving some point later today. And I'd also like to point out that if you do wish to engage with us, please do so either via Twitter or via our email. One of our sales emails is put there. So on that note, many thanks for listening, and goodbye.